Welcome to the latest Tablet podcast. My name's Ruth Gledhill and I'm an assistant editor of the Tablet. And with me today in what I hope will be the first of 10 podcasts in the first series that we're doing with her is Liz Dodd. Now, Liz used to sit next to me at the Tablet when she was a journalist there, and now she has, of all things, gone off and become a nun. So, Liz, just explain what you are exactly.
Hi Ruth, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this. I miss sitting next to you in the office. Yeah, that's right. So I'm a sister of St. Joseph of Peace. We're a congregation of about 120, 130 women based in the UK and in the US. And our charism is peace through justice. So working for social justice, a lot of work with migrants, people experiencing homelessness, working for peace in the many, many ways that's needed in our world at the moment. So you can probably see where I fitted right in here.
I can, and we miss you a lot at the Tablet in the newsroom.
I'm still there in some ways because I get to write my column, and we get a hard copy of the Tablet here in the house every week. So
yeah, and you've got a column actually in this week's Tablet, haven't you?
I have, yes, yeah. I don't know if I can preview it or not. It's got lots of different things I'm bringing in. There's a bit of David Lynch. There's a bit of The Traitors, which, as anyone who's read the column before knows, is one of my favourite television programmes. And there's a natural segue, isn't there, from The Traitors into what's going on in American politics.
No, we do miss you, but I think, their sisters are very lucky to have you. I know you're based in Nottingham, but you go to America, don't you, and other parts of the world. And weren't you just addressing the UN the other day?
Yeah, it's crazy when anyone says it. So I'm very lucky. I get to go to visit our sisters in New Jersey and our sisters in Seattle fairly regularly. There's an amazing amount of travel involved in being a nun. Like, I had no idea. But most recently, at the beginning of last month, I visited the United Nations in Geneva, and I had a chance to speak to about 450 people at a screening of the movie Cabrini about migrants and refugees. And it was maybe the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. But it was one of those things that in the run up to it, I was saying to God, like, I'm never doing this again. Like, this is not worth how frightened I've been for the run up to it. And then when I was speaking, and I was speaking alongside some really amazing people, and I had the chance to say my bit about the work we do here in my house and my sisters who I live with. And I just suddenly had this moment of like, oh, it was worth it.
And did you see the Bishops' Conference put up a laudatory little piece about you with a photograph? I mean, goodness me, from you going from writing about them at the Tablet to them now writing about you.
And it was such a kind article as well. I think we had something on our Nottingham Diocesan website too. I know that I can really lay into the bishops a bit sometimes in my column. So when they show that sort of generosity of spirit towards me, I'm always delighted.
Well, it did show that you're a bit appreciated by the church, and so you should be. I mean, what you're doing is really, really amazing, and they're so lucky to have you, like we were for all those years.
It's the people around you, isn't it? Like, when I first heard the invitation to go and speak at the United Nations, which I just get a kick out of saying it. I knew they were looking for a sister who'd worked with migrants and refugees. And I said to the person who called me, like, I've only been doing this for a few years, and I mentioned some names. I was like, there are all these women who are much better at it than me, but they wanted to approach me, so I desperately try to get someone else to do it for me. But
well, I can't wait to see where you go next. Before you know where you are, you'll be on one of these Vatican commissions. So, talking of which, today we're going to have three areas of discussion. And first of all, we're going to talk about women in the church, women and the church. Then we'll have a look a little bit at America, what's happening in American politics at the moment, because how can you do a podcast and not talk about America? Then we'll talk a little bit about what's in Saturday's tablets. So, women in the church. Now, Sarah MacDonald reported in our news pages in last week's tablet that the second commission on women at the Vatican was meeting, and it's still meeting this week. I think the meeting finishes on the 7th, which is the day this podcast will go out. So we don't know what, if anything, has been decided or what the Pope will decide to reveal, if anything, about it. But the context is quite controversial because there is a growing movement at the church's grassroots for the ordination of women deacons. And in the tablet, we're always carrying pieces about the fact that women seem to have been ordained deacons in the early church, Phoebe and so forth, at the very least, if not more than that. Margaret Hebblethwaite, of course, in the tablet is a big advocate for this kind of research and for the role of women in the Gospels and in the church. And yet Pope Francis himself, to the great disappointment of many Catholic women, obviously not all Catholic women, but many Catholic women all over the world, has made it quite clear that the ordination of women is just not on the agenda at all. And is that hard and fast, do you think?
I have a horrible feeling it's going to be hard and fast in my lifetime. It is such a difficult issue, and I find whenever I'm speaking to non-Catholic or sort of secular press, and I find myself not defending the Pope's line, but sort of saying, he's sort of working with what he can work with, then within myself, I'm like, why am I defending this? In what other organisation would you be able to restrict the real exercise of authority and power only to men and still get away with it? And what other organisation would I defend from doing it? And yet, here I am. So it's difficult. The Pope has made amazing progress in terms of improving the visibility of women in positions of authority in the church. We've had a couple of really big appointments just this year. I think we had the sister who's been appointed the prefect of the dicastery for religious, Sister Simona Brambilla, and a sister who has been promoted to president of the governor of the Holy See. Those are significant positions of authority, and I think the Pope said after one of them on one of his aeroplane press conferences, women make better managers. And when you have, whenever he's appointed women to positions of authority in the church, in the Vatican, it's got better. So that's really positive. But alongside that, so for example, with Sister Simona, who's been appointed to this job at the dicastery of religious, along with her has been appointed a pro-prefect, who's Cardinal Amat. And when I found that out, I was furious. Well, furious is probably a bit strong, but I just thought, what is going on here? You can't, that almost diminishes all the authority and all the prominence that you've given her. It does. And it makes it look like a token appointment, which I really don't think it is. Now, what I've heard subsequently is that the big issue with appointing women, even, I was going to say, like, even religious, women to positions of authority like that, heading dicasteries, is that there are points where they will act on behalf of the Pope or make decisions using the power of the papacy. And there are some within the church who think that that is sort of a priestly ministry. So in order to be able to do it, you have to be a priest, so you have to be a man. So that, I think, is where the sticking point is coming a bit for Pope Francis. He's trying to appoint women to positions where they have visibility, power, and authority, but the structures of the church limit the exercise of that power and authority if you're not a priest. And where we currently stand is that women can't be priests. So,
but women, the last synod, the synod on synodality, the last meeting of that synod, women were voting members, weren't they? And that was the first time. And I was just reading up a little bit about the Second Vatican Council and the struggle that women had even to be heard at that meeting, which they weren't really, not properly. One female journalist at one Eucharistic celebration, one service, was denied permission to go up and receive. Yeah, but a Swiss guard turned her away from the
Oh,
altar.
of course. Oh, the optics of that nowadays. You just cringe, don't you?
It was before the days when these things were televised, so it was just described afterwards. It wasn't seen, but
Oh,
so we have come a long way, I suppose. But still, as you were saying, compared to what it's out there in the secular world, it still
exactly.
looks so antediluvian. But if you say that to anybody, they say, well, this is, the church is separate, it's holy, and we can't be bound by the norms of the secular world.
Yeah, or you have to accept that the church moves slowly. And I don't know about that. I mean, you covered one of the, or I guess you would have covered one of the most significant shifts in ecclesial history in this country with the Church of England when women became priests. So in a sense, like, does this feel like the Catholic Church is going through the same process, or does it feel different to you?
It feels very different because when when I worked for the Times, and that was one of the big stories, women priests and women bishops throughout my time there, slowly moving up the agenda, the Lambeth conferences and then general synods, and happening in other countries faster, and then not happening in other countries at all. And that was because the Church of England in particular, which has this voting body, the General Synod, the governing body, which makes laws. It's a law-making body. So it's not like the Catholic Church, which doesn't operate in the same way at all. And so if you can get something onto the agenda at the General Synod and get a 2/3 majority, then you can get it through. And so you can kind of get a change through by argument and persuasion. And the clergy, laity and bishops all have a voice. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an equal voice, but they do all have a voice. And if you can get enough of each house, each of the three houses, then you're home and dry. It took women bishops was very difficult for them to get through. Women clergy obviously was very controversial, women priests, because that resulted in a lot of high Anglicans defecting to Rome, and Pope Benedict, kind of welcomed them in really, and many of them became Catholic priests, and to this day, you've still got the ordinariate operating very successfully and fruitfully. Certainly, one of the local parishes where I live is an ordinariate parish, and we do a lot of things with them. It's been a very successful ministry from the Catholic point of view, anyway. And I think the Anglicans probably miss those priests. But it felt the reason a lot of the Anglicans said they couldn't accept it was because it was a unilateral decision, and they could only accept such a decision if the Roman Catholic Church did it. And then now in the Catholic Church, you're getting the argument that, well, we'll only do it if the Orthodox do it. So I think that's probably what might have to happen. So you could only get but if you look back historically, before the Middle Ages, when women were very actively involved in what were arguably sacramental roles, which were later preserved just to the male priesthood, but women religious were fulfilling quite a lot of functions that are now they're not allowed to do. In some parts of the world, they became more involved in those areas because there was a shortage of male priests in the areas they were ministering to, and that was often because all the men had been called away to war of some kind or other. And so the women were called in, and the women religious fulfilled those roles. But then during the Middle Ages and beyond, there was a big clamping down on that, and women were prevented from doing anything like that at all, and sidelined into what they do now. And Pope Francis, to do him credit, is really trying to address that. But he's saying their role is different. It's not the same as men, so therefore the ordination block still stands, still in place. And I often wonder if he will do a footnote thingy. You know, he's quite good at doing little footnotes, isn't he? But what do you think? There's any chance of that, or is he wedded to the refusal?
I don't know if it's hugely high up his list of priorities. I think he's got a real sense of justice, and that's where these appointments of women to senior positions are coming in. But I think he's probably more, I hesitate to use the word orthodox, traditional around his views of women's ordination than maybe I would be myself, or I would like him to be. I think your point about the Church of England and General Synod is a really important one, particularly given all we've heard about being a synodal church in the last couple of years. It's making me think of there's this call for women in the Catholic Church to strike during Lent. It's a campaign, I think it's organised by one of the women's ordination groups. If we are the synodal church, we don't have in a way, thank God, because you and I have both been to those general synods and they can go on for quite a long time. But if we are the synodal church and we gather at masses on Sundays, in communities, all this sort of thing, then maybe a strike is the exercise of the power of the synod, the lay power of the synod to an extent. I don't know. Are you going to go on strike?
No, I'm not. I mean, no, I mean, in my church, I feel that I've really done a major achievement if I just even managed to get onto the welcoming rota that week. It is mainly women doing it. Everyone wants to do it, that's how it feels to me anyway. And so, I wait for the email to come in every week. Am I there? Have I made it this week?
Yeah. This is a really important point. I was talking to someone about this strike the other week and whether or not we'd participate. And I mean, because of the ministry that I do in the house, I don't have a lot of work. I don't have any kind of responsibilities within the parish, except for reminding them about how Arsenal are doing in the football. But the women who are the powerhouses in my parish do the jobs they do because they love them.
Exactly. It is one. I love doing the greeting. I do the Saturday 6 p.m. masses when I do it, and it's so nice talking to people and handing them the books and the newsletter from the priest, and it's just such a holy atmosphere and such an atmosphere of warmth and humility and welcome.
Yeah, and you're not doing it out of a place of like, I wish I could be ordained a priest, but I can't, so this is the best I can do. You're doing it because you love doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think a lot of people in the church, we find roles that suit us, and we do these things because we really love them, and we love the church, and everything about. I shouldn't admit this, but I don't manage to get there every week, but everything about it when I do get there is just so lovely, and it. I was brought up an Anglican, and so grew up in a very Catholic Anglican style ministry. But it's like this has got the best of what I loved about the Anglican Church, but then so much extra as well. So we will come back to this subject because obviously with the synodal process ongoing still. This will come up again and again. Oh, and I mustn't forget to mention, and I'm sure, I don't know if you've been apprised of this already, because I know you speak regularly to our editor, Brendan, but we are planning a big conference on women in the church, and it's an in real life conference, not virtual ones. And I daren't kind of say too much about it now, but we've got this incredible venue lined up. And we're working with this amazing organisation, and I just can't wait for that to happen. I'm really hoping that I can be involved, and I'm really hoping you will too.
That sounds fantastic.
It's
Yeah,
going
I didn't know anything about it. That sounds news-breaking podcast.
You're getting exclusive information here, and I've got the first draft of notes about it that I've been
Wow.
sent. So as I say, I can't say too much about it, but you can imagine the kind of things that we
Yeah,
talk about.
wonderful. And the tablet has really got the clout to bring something like that together.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
it's going to be really great. So in order to find out more, you're just going to have to read the tablet and carry on listening to this podcast. But as plans for that progress, we will definitely return to this subject again. But so moving on from women in the church, let's go to the world stage and Donald Trump, and the kind of bewildering speed of change and developments that are happening across the Atlantic. And, what end, I don't know what it must be like for people in America, but certainly when I watch it happening, I almost can't watch the news. I love news. I'm addicted to news. I've been a news reporter all my life. For the first time in my life, I'm finding I'm having to turn the television off.
It's relentless, isn't it?
So someone at my gym said, what's he going to go for next? Scotland?
Yeah.
No one thought it would be Gaza.
No, I know. With his developer mindset, maybe I'm being too charitable, but seen a commercial opportunity perhaps and gone for it. I think this is in a sense a great segue from what we were talking about before, because if you want to see a prophetic woman in the church, how about that bishop who spoke at the inaugural service?
Bishop Budd,
Bishop Budd, absolutely. The courage that must have taken. I freaked out about 450 people at the United Nations and what I could get away with saying and what I couldn't. But to stand there and be the voice of migrants, refugees, trans people, lesbian and gay people was just, I still go back and watch that sermon and just think like, to look someone like Donald Trump in the eye and have the courage to say that, and to know, because part of what's so disturbing about what's happening in America is a lot of the Trump support, and I want to say the sort of the cult of Donald Trump and MAGA and all that sort of thing can be really vicious and unchecked. Trump's decision to release all those people from prison who'd been part of the storming of the Capitol building, like, almost says you've got free reign to do what you want. But the flip side, and something I find really difficult about all of this, is that Americans I know who support Trump, and I don't know many, but I met some when I was on my bike ride over there, are decent people. I saw a Facebook post the other day by a Trump voter who was saying the reason they were voting for Trump was XYZ, and it's another narrative. Their narrative is, I want my kids to have jobs, I want my country to be secure and prosperous, and the way to do that is to close the border with Mexico, to withhold aid from other countries, and so on. None of it comes from this place of wanting to be racist or trap people in poverty. I believe it comes from this place of wanting what we all want, which is for people to be secure and happy. But it's just a totally different narrative to the one that I hold about what makes people secure and happy. And the problem is that when both sides demonize the other, when I just think that Trump supporters are gun-toting, border closing, whatever, you can't dialogue. I think we have to really work to see people and have conversations with people and say, why are you voting in this way that I don't understand? What are your fears and what's happening in your community?
Yeah. And he has been very clever. For example, a big item in America has been trans women in sports, and that's become very contentious. And by signing a document ruling out any trans woman from taking part in women's sports, he's kind of brought loads of women on board.
Yeah.
And got loads of voters that way. And there was this picture of him surrounded by all these young women, these girls and these sports women and stuff. And J.K. Rowling, tweeted, this is what it's come to. She's of course been a big advocate against trans women in sports, so the whole topic is very confusing and very distressing. Really capitalised on that debate to his own advantage, and completely walked all over the Democrats on that topic. Which, how could the Democrats have let that happen?
I know.
It's such a terrible mishandling of that whole subject.
I think it goes back to this issue of not listening or not taking seriously the concerns and the problems of what's going on in Middle America. I think it's not true to say that Democrats are only concerned with what happens in kind of New York and Los Angeles and DC. I think there's Democratic support across the country, but there's a real, and we saw this in the election, there's a real hub of people who haven't felt listened to under the Biden administration, and they've spoken to other people. Social media has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, Trump's won in a landslide, and everyone's sort of looking on. For me, it reminded me a lot of the Brexit referendum. You're sort of looking on and thinking, how did that happen?
Oh, completely. You're absolutely right. It's exactly what it feels like. How did this happen?
Yeah.
And that's how I felt after Brexit as well. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the terrible things, and I feel really guilty for this. I was thinking, well, at least now we won't get tariffed because we're not in the EU anymore. So suddenly I'm thinking, there was an advantage to Brexit. Wait a minute, I'm not really.
Yeah. But I think in a sense that's part of the Trump playbook.
Yeah.
That sort of bizarre logic. The fact that you find yourself thinking, oh well, wasn't Brexit a good idea? Then you're like, how did that? Because in a funny way, that's what I'm trying to get at in my column in the paper this week. My leap from the traitors to Donald Trump is that the traitors, I found out as part of my obsession, is edited backwards. So they shoot the end and then work backwards so that as you're watching it, you think you can see things unfold in the way that they didn't. And I think that's what happens with Trump and Musk and that whole world. They've decided on a future and they're editing backwards. So now we find ourselves saying, "Oh, wasn't Brexit a good idea?" Because now we don't have tariffs. Well, hang on. What? It's post-production, isn't it?
It's a really good column, Liz, and the traitors was fantastic, wasn't it? And you mentioned American traitors.
Oh yeah.
And is that good?
It's really good. I hesitated to get into it because I just couldn't believe I was so wedded to the UK series, and I was messaging with my sister, not my nun sister, my family sister, and I was like, look, my fear is that it's going to be too American. It'll be too kind of wild and out there. And she was like, that's exactly what makes it so good. And she was spot on. It is throwing things at their television, gasping in shock. They really know. The people who are in the current American series of The Traitors are all celebrities from other reality TV shows. So they know how to do reality TV, and they really kind of ham things up and work their sort of relationships and the shocking moments and stuff like that. It's absolutely great.
Oh, well, I think that's going to be our next binge watch at home then, because we're really missing The Traitors now we finished it. Yeah. Well, talking about women and media and and all things broadcast. In a couple of weeks ago in the tablet, our cover was the top 20 Catholic movies of all time, and we had Julie Andrews on the cover from The Sound of Music, and then we had A Man for All Seasons as well, The Gospel according to St Matthew, Of Gods and Men. However, the ones that were missing were Babette's Feast, Passion of Joan of Arc, Bernadette, Bells of St Mary's, and I misremembered. I thought, well, they've also missed the Thornbirds, but I'm not sure that was ever a movie. I think it might have just been a book and a mini series. Were you a fan of The Sound of Music?
Not at all. Terrible. I'm a terrible nun for this, because the one I was really pleased to see was The Exorcist.
Oh my goodness, I still haven't had the courage to watch that.
It's great. I mean, I don't know if you're a horror movie person, it would be interesting to know what it was like to watch it now for the first time.
Oh, I'll do it, and I'll tell you next time we speak.
You might find it really horrible, and you'll be like, "Oh, an awful film she recommended to you." It is profoundly theological. It's a great book, and it's a great movie. There weren't enough horror movies in there. That's my only criticism of this otherwise fantastic list. But then horror movies are my big things. Like last year, there was a brilliant film called, I think it was Pray for the Devil, which was about a nun who was an exorcist. But of course, she's not allowed to be an exorcist because she's not a priest. So, she's the sort of prefect of the dicastery for religious of the exorcist world, being supervised by another priest. Absolutely. I was sat there watching it in our big cinema in Nottingham, and I was like, I'm probably the only. I wonder what people here would think. Because they knew that among them was.
I'm definitely going to try and catch this.
Yeah, anyway. Again, it's very grisly, but I wasn't sure what the criteria were for the list, because I thought, like Lord of the Rings, does that count as a Catholic movie? Or does it have to? Because the Narnia, none of the. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of the modern Narnia films, but I was surprised they didn't get a mention. Definitely Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll put a link in the show notes to that feature, because the tablet is giving away a DVD of Robert Bresson's Diary of a Country Priest for the reader we think makes the liveliest case for the best Catholic film that they've overlooked.
Right. With my list of horror films involving nuns. There was a good one with Russell Crowe called The Pope's Exorcist that I think came out last year.
Yeah.
It was based on a book by the priest who actually was the Pope's exorcist.
Yeah, and actually that's just released on Netflix. And when we were looking the other day for something to watch, that came up, and that's on our to watch list.
It's not as good as The Exorcist, but it's a fun-filled, You might want to watch The Sound of Music as a palate cleanser after.
Right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our first podcast together, Liz.
Wonderful.
And there's so much to talk about, and we'll meet up again in a fortnight.
Brilliant.
And have a great 2 weeks.
Thank you very much. You too. That was great fun. It was like being back in the editor's office after the paper's gone, arguing about what's going to be in the next edition.
I'm sure we won't be short of things to talk about next time. There'll certainly be more about America.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And we'll give you the latest on our Women in the Church conference, but there'll be other developments in the church, I'm sure, that we can discuss. We've got Lent coming up. We've got lots of peace and justice issues on the horizon, anti-trafficking, massive issues to discuss the synod, and Pope Francis being as active as ever, which is great. It gives us lots to talk about and think about. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. That was great.